Common methods of learning guitar. One of the major obstacles of learning guitar is finding a place to start. Many different reasons for this. One is just the sheer volume of information out there. There's a whole lot of information out there, which is great, but it can be a little bit overwhelming to decide on what part of that information to focus in on. Another reason is that many instructors and many students are going to have different objectives in terms of what they want to learn with the guitar. So when you talk to different instructors, they will emphasize different starting points. And there's a lot of good natural places where you can start learning the guitar. So it's not like there's one point where everybody starts off at. In other words, if you were to look at guitar instruction courses, beginning instruction courses, you'll find that many different beginning instruction courses start at very different places. They kind of start in what they think is going to be the most important thing to lead people into the learning of the guitar. And then students, of course, also have their own objectives. You might be more into one type of thing or another type of thing that just naturally interests you, and that's where your starting point tends to lead towards as you progress forward. So because you have all these different options, it can be a little bit confusing in terms of, again, how to start off. Many people also might have some background in music that other people do not have as well, which could alter where people should start off and where you should go from that point in time. So I'm going to go over a few common methods that I find when I go over the beginning guitar lesson information, go over them in a little bit more detail here, and then future presentations I'll go into them in more detail, and then hopefully provide information and resources to instructors that teach that kind of stuff so we can kind of compile everything here or compile some stuff in one location. So here's some 4 common methods, and again, I'll just kind of list the methods. These are methods that when I look at beginner guitar lessons, this is where people tend to kind of start off or emphasize one of these different areas and then branch into, they all branch into all of them eventually because they all blend together, they all come together at some point in time, but they'll emphasize the starting point at one place or another. So for example, some people will emphasize the learning of basic chords. And the learning of basic chords is usually going to be emphasized because you can then use those basic chords to construct songs, which is often what many people are going to be most motivated in when they go into learning guitar, because they want to play something that's going to be familiar to them and familiar to others, and that's going to incentivize them to keep on playing. So the easiest way to get into that, to do that, is to learn some basic chords, and those chords can then be put together to learn familiar songs that you can play for yourself and others that can facilitate, you wanting to learn more about it. So that's going to be a common starting point. Another common starting point is to learn basic scales, basic patterns on the guitar, so you can start to learn a little bit about the fretboard, how the fretboard's going to be put together. The most common one for guitar or that would be learned is going to be a pentatonic type of scale for many different reasons. One is it's a flexible type of scale. And once you start learning the scales, you can move up and around the guitar a little bit more, and it kind of leads into learning more theory because now you're connecting patterns together, and you're kind of wanting to say, well, why does that connect to another pattern and whatnot? And then learning power chords is often another starting point or in the beginning area of when you're going to be learning in the guitar, because the power chord's pretty easy shape to play, and it's completely movable, so you can move it up and down the neck. So that gives you flexibility to basically move up and down the neck with the power chords. The power chords aren't like a full chord. They don't have 3 notes in them, but only the 2 notes, but they're going to be movable, which is nice. And then there's the basic music theory. And so this is an area that some people have more background on than others, but you need some basic music theory to really start to understand these things. When you start to learn the songs, if you understand, a little bit of music theory on why the chords are put together and whatnot, then that makes it a little bit easier to think about going forward on a practical level, and it makes it a little bit more fun just on a theoretical level as well. So the question still remains then, we have these 4 different methods. What's the best method? Where should we start at? And I would kind of think of it as these 4 different paths that are going to be going to the same location at the end of the day. They all kind of converge together at some point in time. I'll talk a little bit more about that in future presentations. But what you want to do then is focus a little bit as you're starting off on each of these methods and thinking of them as, 4 different starting points that are 4 different roads that are all going to basically converge together to some degree in the future. Now, as you do that, of course, many people will gravitate towards learning one or the other of these items based on different types of things, what they're most interested in, possibly what their instructor's most interested in, and basically based on their past history, on what they know in terms of music already. But I would think of them as basically four different points, four different things that you're going to be learning that are all related, of course, and will lead, as you start to learn them, to come together. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in future presentations. But if you have that kind of in the back of your mind, that you're going to be learning these different skills that are all basically going to converge together at some future point in time and kind of make sense as one whole, one road in the future, I think that's going to be an easier way to move. It's also great to have these different kind of starting points or these different methods to think about, because then you can basically jump between them. You can say, I'm going to learn a little bit about this one and then move to something else to pick up something else. And that way you can break up your learning pattern and not into chunks, learnable chunks. So you can work on one skill and then kind of move to another skill as well. And they're all really, important types of things to learn. So anything that you're emphasizing in, you're inevitably going to get criticism from some people that are saying, you should be focusing on some other thing or this is the thing you should do. But they're all important. And usually when you're focusing in on like scales or power chords or especially basic theory, what you're always going to hear is, why aren't you playing me a song? I don't recognize what you're playing here, And so that's often but they're all important, obviously. So anyone that's kind of interesting is worth pushing forward with.